Hello, welcome to the MMA Freak Fight of the Week. I'm Matt Salzer. So we're going to be reviewing UFC 246, and we'll go from there. Just to get this out of the way, the fighter of the week is going to go to Conor McGregor. Admittedly, the guy is impressive, and he did pull off a pretty impressive knockouts. So to start off with the main event, of course, Conor McGregor faced Donald Cerrone, and it was implicated that the winner of this particular match would probably get a lightweight title shot. That ultimately is not what's happening because Conor says he wants to fight at welterweight and establish himself at welterweight. Now, granted, this is uncharacteristically humble of Conor. He's usually the one who says, I deserve to be getting the title shots. But I guess, like I said, he wants to establish himself at welterweight. So he won against Donald Cerrone at welterweight, and now he wants to fight at welterweight. Here's the thing. Conor McGregor is not a welterweight. He's not a natural welterweight. He's more of a natural lightweight. He was a huge featherweight. We all know that he looked emaciated while he was fighting at featherweight. He was too big for the weight class. He's just right for a lightweight. The idea of him fighting at welterweight, though, it's just, this is the point where a bigger fighter with even less skills kind of almost offsets Conor McGregor. And of course, two top guys in the welterweight division were there. Kamaru Usman was there, and Jorge Masvidal was just there. I would argue that Masvidal should be getting the next welterweight title shot. But he was pretty much making it plain that he was open to possibly fighting Conor. That would be a pretty close fight because, Masvidal did go 3 rounds, probably would have gone longer if it had not been for Nate Diaz's excessive bleeding. And we all know what happened with Conor McGregor and Nate Diaz. So I think it's safe to say that this fight is definitely one that implicates ramifications within the welterweight division, but I honestly don't think Conor is going to accomplish what he wants to. He's trying to expand his legacy. He wants to become the first 3-division champion in the UFC. I don't think he's the guy to do that. I genuinely do not. I mean, he might prove me wrong, but I don't think so. So then in the co-main event, you had Holly Holm fighting to a decision against Raquel Pennington, and honestly, this fight, it seemed to me that Holly was more dominant in this fight with Raquel Pennington than she was the first time around. So I don't really know where this leaves. Well, it definitely puts Holly back in another position, but I don't think, unless she improves drastically, I don't think Holly can beat Amanda Nunes. And considering I'm a Holly fan, that's, that's hard for me to say, but I don't think she can beat her. Unless she changes drastically, comes up with a better game plan than what she did. As Raquel Pennington, she did challenge for the title. I would not call her a gatekeeper, but she's certainly not, up there in terms of best fighter of all time. So we're just going to have to see what happens with Raquel Pennington. Then the fight before, you had the heavyweights, Alexei Oleinik submitting Maurice Green from The Ultimate Fighter, and I was surprised that Green was able to hold off Oleinik in the first round, especially considering that submission he had, but I was also surprised at the same time that Oleinik had the energy to be able to pull off a submission in the second round. Granted, he went for what I would argue is an easier submission where you don't have to exert as much energy, but still, it's impressive. It's really impressive that you have this old man still fighting in the UFC. Go Russia. Then you had Brian Kelleher submitting Ode Osborne to the point where, I believe this is the fight where Osborne was in such a guillotine choke to where he couldn't submit with his arms. His arms were caught off. He was submitting with his leg. That was actually a little impressive to me that he was able to pull a submission like that. But yeah, it was a night of submissions. There were some knockouts, but this was a night of submissions. Then to start out the pay-per-view, you had Carlos Diego Ferreira submitting returning to lightweight Anthony Pettis, and again, this was one of those submissions where, Anthony Pettis doesn't get submitted very often, so this was honestly a little bit on the surprising side. Then you had a last fight on the prelims, Roxanne Modafferi pulling a decision against Macy Barber. She was already winning in this fight, but then Macy did something to her knee or something to her leg, but she certainly was not at full capacity anymore. So it's hard to see that happen because Macy is definitely a good fighter. And yeah, it's just hard to see that happen to an up-and-comer like that. I believe that with MMA Freak, she was voted the Breakout Fighter of the Year last year. Again, hard to see that happen to a up-and-coming fighter, but it happens. So then you had Sadiq Youssef pull off a decision against Andre Fili. If I recall correctly, I think this was one of the fights where I may have disagreed. I'm glad there weren't too many decisions because I was not in agreement with a few of the judges' decisions on that night because they just were not pulling off good ones. I think I did score the fight for Fili, but I definitely did score the fight for Tim Elliott in his fight against Askar Askarov, but the judges found it the other way. I'm just like, are you serious? I mean, if I recall, the crowd was booing because they didn't agree with that either. I don't know where the judges were that night, but they certainly weren't scoring things the right way. Then in the first fight of the prelims and the last fight I'm going to review, you had Drew Dober TKOing Nasrat Haqparast in the first round. And so yeah, that was UFC 246 in a nutshell. So we have a fight night and a Bellator fight this coming weekend. We'll see how those go. And I fortunately have the convenience of having both services and being able to watch both of those. So, Cyborg versus Julia Budd. That's the major fight I'm going to be reviewing for the upcoming Bellator weekend. I'm still surprised with these two fighters orbiting each other in MMA for so long that they're finally fighting each other. This is something that I'm surprised has not happened sooner, and I'm glad it's finally going to happen. But there's also a very unique opportunity here in that Cyborg may be the first woman in general history of MMA to be able to win all the major titles of her weight class. She won the Strikeforce Featherweight Championship, she won the Invicta Featherweight Championship, she won the UFC Featherweight Championship, now she's competing for the Bellator Featherweight Championship. These are the four major women's featherweight championships of MMA during the eras that they were in. So this is a unique opportunity because, let's face it, not everyone won all of the major heavyweight championships. Pride, for example, you did not have Dan Henderson win the middleweight or the light heavyweight championships after winning the equivalents in Pride because, of course, Pride. And then, of course, Gomi didn't compete that long in the UFC, and he also failed in other promotions when he went to World Victory Road. It's just there's not that much crossover. Granted, you did have Big Nog win the UFC Interim Heavyweight Championship and the Pride Heavyweight Championship, but it was an interim championship. And there were other heavyweight championships outside of the UFC at the time, which I could make the argument for major. So like I said, Cyborg has this very unique opportunity here. So we'll see how that goes. So thank you very much. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Comment down below what you'd like to see coming from us here at MMA Freak. At MMA Freakout is the MMA Freak Twitter. At Matthew Salzer is both my personal Twitter and my Instagram. Be sure to check out MMA-freak.com for exclusive content, and I'll see you next time.